What I have here is a drawing of Darwin finches found on the Galapagos archipelago. And they're famous because of Darwin's observations, which in part led to his discovery of evolution by natural selection. So, first, what is evolution? What do we mean by that? Well, in the very general sense of the word, evolution is a process of change in a certain direction. It's change across time. Right, this is sort of your off-the-shelf dictionary definition of evolution, but we need something a little bit more specific in biology. Biological evolution, in contrast, is, very simply put, descent with modification. But let's unpack that a little bit more, give a more detailed definition. It's inherited change, so that modification is inherited in the properties of groups of organisms over the course of generations. So it takes some time for this change to happen. It's inherited. And the change that we're talking about, these properties, these are physical traits, physical characteristics, or what we call in biology phenotypes. And I want to highlight a very important part of this definition: groups of organisms. So if this definition were inherited change in the properties of individuals, that wouldn't be biological evolution. So it's important to keep that in mind. We're talking about groups of organisms. When individuals change, this is something completely different. Let me try to find the perfect spot for myself. There probably isn't one. When individuals change over time, we call this metamorphosis or development. This is not biological evolution. The monarch butterfly, for example, changes from a caterpillar to an adult via metamorphosis. Or likewise, inside of the egg, a chicken develops from a very early embryo until right before it hatches a nearly fully formed chick. Now, also in this definition of biological evolution, we have probably the most important word, change, right? This is at the heart of what evolution means. But just because you have biological evolution or you have change, that isn't quite the whole picture. We're still missing a piece, because change on its own doesn't necessarily lead to organization and complexity that we see in life. We're still missing that mechanism that allows biological evolution to produce something complex like life forms, rather than chaos and disorder, which is what you get when change is random. Obviously, biological evolution is not random. This mechanism that's responsible is what we call natural selection. So let's talk about exactly what that is, the mechanism by which biological evolution occurs. It was actually co-discovered by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. So these two old white guys stumbled upon natural selection independently on their own. Of course, Darwin gets all the credit because he did publish it first in The Origin of Species. But if it wasn't for Wallace, he perhaps might never have. It was Wallace who corresponded with Darwin a lot. They were very open and they talked a lot about their discoveries. Wallace he helped convince, along with Darwin's wife, to publish his work, The Origin of Species. So though often Wallace is overlooked, doesn't get the popular credit, they are both recognized in biology as co-discoverers of the theory of biological evolution by natural selection. Now, there are 3 ingredients of natural selection that you need in order for natural selection to work. And it's important to have a clear understanding of these 3 ingredients and how they work. The first ingredient, variation among individuals in a population. Second, the differences in this population are heritable. And 3, there's differential survival and reproduction, i.e., not everyone gets to survive, not everyone gets to reproduce. So if you put these 3 ingredients together, shake them up, natural selection follows naturally. So let's go through these 3 ingredients one at a time with an example population. Ladybugs. There's a lot of variation in this population. You've got red ladybugs, orange ladybugs, big ones, little ones. A lot of variation in their phenotypes, in their characteristics. Second ingredient, inheritance. We can see by observing that the red ladybugs have red offspring. Orange ladybugs have orange kids. Big parents tend to have big kids, and so on. So parents pass on their traits to the next generation. The third ingredient, differential survival and reproduction. So, as we can see here, moving from one generation across time to another generation, a subsequent generation, we see a difference in the composition of characteristics. In this case, we've lost all of our orange ladybugs. We just have the red ones left. Some ladybugs are more likely to survive and reproduce than others, obviously. The only thing we're missing here is that agent of change. What is causing this difference from one generation to the next? What happened to all the orange ladybugs? Well, in our fictional example here, it's because of these tyrannical blue jays. They ate them all. Maybe the red ones are poisonous. Maybe the orange ones are easier to find. Regardless, what matters to the ladybugs is that if you're orange, you're less likely to survive. You're less likely to reproduce. And so your characteristics are less likely to show up in subsequent generations. So this is what's meant by natural selection. Okay? Blue jays here, being part of nature, are selecting. Right? Nature is selecting for the red ladybugs because the blue jays are eating up all of the orange ones. Right? It doesn't have to be blue jays. It could be some other aspect of nature. It could be a cooling climate. Maybe things are getting cold and the smaller ladybugs have a harder time maintaining a temperature that's conducive for survival. So across time, cold weather might shift this population from a mix of large and small ladybugs to just large ladybugs. That would be natural selection too. Now, this process is very similar to a process that humans have actually been using for thousands of years. Artificial selection, selective breeding. Artificial selection it's the exact same mechanism. It uses the same 3 ingredients as natural selection. All right, look at this classic example. The gray wolf, a wild canid species. Just 1,500 years of humans selectively breeding the gray wolf, and we end up with countless breeds of an astonishing amount of variation. It's really quite incredible. The way we got from here, our gray wolf, to our pets, via artificial selection, it's the same thing that nature does. It's the same 3 ingredients. Let's go through another example, and I'll show you how artificial selection is nearly identical to natural selection. And we'll highlight that one difference. What is it that makes it different? So we have a population here of teosinte grass. This is a wild grass that grows in central Mexico. And so in our population, we've got some natural variation in the size of the seed that's produced by the grass. Some produce small seeds. Some produce large seeds. Also, in this population, we know that this trait is heritable. There's inheritance. Small seed parents give rise to small seed offspring. Large seed parents have large seed offspring. We also have in this population, across time, the size of the seed of this wild grass has changed. It's gotten bigger over time. What is the agent of change? Are they blue jays that are eating up all the small seeds? No. In this case, human farmers have been selectively breeding teosinte for thousands of years and have eventually produced maize or corn through selecting individuals to breed into the next generation and excluding the smaller seed individuals and not giving them a chance to breed, or in this case in plants, pollinate. So we can see here really the only difference in natural selection and artificial selection is what is that agent of change. In artificial selection, it's humans choosing desirable traits from one generation and excluding the others from passing on their characteristics to the next generation. Darwin recognized the similarities between natural selection and artificial selection. He wrote about it in his Origin of Species. He said, "If feeble man can do much by his powers of artificial selection, I can see no limit to the amount of change which may be effected in the long course of time by nature's power of selection." So he realized that given that it's the same mechanism that nature uses and that humans use, now just look what humans have been able to do in a relatively short amount of time, thousands of years, with maize, with dogs, almost everything in agriculture, everything that we buy at the produce section at the grocery store is a product of artificial selection. If we can do that, just imagine what Mother Nature can do over millions and millions of years. The last thing that I want to say about biological evolution is the fact that it's a scientific theory. And I want to be very clear so that everyone understands what we mean by the word theory, scientific theory, because it means something very different in the context of science and how we use it as scientists and scholars, and how you would use it in just everyday common sense. So scientific theory is a comprehensive, coherent body of interconnected hypotheses, well supported by reasoning and empirical evidence. that explains some aspect of nature. So theory, in the scientific sense, is really a very well supported hypothesis or group of hypotheses that have kind of lasted the test of time, that have accumulated a critical mass of evidence, supporting evidence, and it's become widely accepted. And some common theories, scientific theories, are the theory of plate tectonics, theory of general relativity, atomic theory, theories that have accumulated lots of support and are recognized and accepted as how the world works. The theory of biological evolution by natural selection is in the same camp as these theories here. In fact, it is the single most important theory in biology. Nothing in biology makes sense without the theory of evolution. Now, the everyday use of theory, right? When we say that in everyday conversation, I've got a theory about. What that really means is an unsupported speculation. So it's closer, it's more akin to what we mean by hypothesis in science. It's an unsupported speculation. So examples of this are the theory that 5G networks and microchips are responsible for mind control and the COVID-19 pandemic, right? This is a theory in the sense of it's a crazy speculation. Or my crazy Uncle Jeff, who has this theory that his pug is the reincarnation of Winston Churchill, right? This is a theory in the common sense. This isn't a scientific theory. So it's important to make that distinction. And if you hear me say theory in class, what I'm talking about is the former, right? Something that's well supported. So watch this, digest it, think about if you have any questions, bring them to class. I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and understand what biological evolution is and how natural selection works. I'll see everyone on Tuesday.